Everyone. My name is Anita McKeag, and Corey Clark, my colleague, and I are hosting this meeting tonight to hear from the community. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So as I mentioned, we're from planning, and then we also have John Gore and the property owner with us tonight too from the applicant team. A few meeting logistics. Let's see, hang on, I'm sorry. I think I'm clicking on the wrong thing here. Bear with me. Let's go into screen share mode. This is what happened, or I'm sorry, slide share. It's what happens when you have too many windows open. I don't know if you all are like that, but I'm a victim of usually 75 pages open on my computer. Okay, there we go. And I did the wrong one. I'm so sorry, everyone. It has been that kind of week. Let's try this again. At this point, Corey, I'll just have you do it, you know. I don't know how we got to that one, but I'm getting aggravated here. Okay, let me see. Okay. Okay, this is my first time in all these having so many problems with what I'm sharing. And I apologize, everyone. I apologize. In a minute here, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. All right, now, Corey, can you see this?
Oh, yes, I can.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry again, guys. Okay. Let's start. All right, so we've gone through some introductions. Okay, so meeting logistics. If hopefully most of you have joined by computer. If you haven't and only joined by the phone, you won't be able to interact as much with us. So if you want to jump on our website really quick, nashville.gov for the planning department, and then click on events at the bottom for the West Nashville Plan, you'll be able to see where you can join. So audio's muted for everyone. We're going to go over Q&A, how to do it really briefly, and then the meeting's being recorded and posted to YouTube. So if you missed something or you've got neighbors that weren't able to see it, they'll be able to watch it later. So I think some of you may be familiar with how you interact with WebEx, but you see down here a list of names, and you'll see your virtual hand down here, and you can raise your hand when we get to the Q&A portion, or you can go ahead and type in a question and send it to all panelists, not just one of us, because that way everybody's paying attention and can see it. You can do that at any time while we're talking. It's going to be pretty brief because most of the time for this meeting is going to be Q&A and interactions. We're just going to go over just some brief background information about why we're here, the difference between policy and zoning, and then hear a brief presentation from the applicant or just talk a little bit about what they're trying to do. And then, like I said, questions and answers. So I think most of you are familiar with the property because you've talked with Corey or received one of our notices. So someone asked to change the land use policy for 6111 Cowden. And this is very early in the review process. We always like to have a community meeting early on so we hear from the community and we understand what thoughts, concerns, ideas are. And so feedback is a big part of our work. And as staff of the planning department, one of our job duties is making recommendations to the planning commission when people do apply to change land use policy and change zoning. So as I said, I think most everyone is familiar with which property we're talking about. A bit of background. Most of you may have heard of Nashville Next. but that's the countywide general plan. So it sets the big picture, the big vision. And as part of that are 14 community plans. They're geographic areas you see on the map on the right. And they guide decision making for the future built to natural environments. And we've been working with community plans since the early 1990s. So this project is in the West Nashville Community Plan. And part of that is Nashville Next applies the big picture, and then we look at properties and neighborhoods individually and apply land use policy to each property across the county. And so basically then the land use policy is the long range vision, and it's going to set up implementation tools such as when somebody comes in and wants to rezone. The land use policies help shape the form and character of a community. The dictionary of policies is called the Community Character Manual. So you'll hear us use words like character policies or land use policies. They're the same thing. And one way we think about things is we organize them by their character. And so that runs the gamut from open space, like, rural parts of like Bells Bend Park, Beeman Park, Warner Parks, to rural areas like Whites Creek and Bells Bend and Scottsboro, to suburban areas, a lot of the outer part of the county, to urban areas like where we are tonight in West Nashville, and then centers like Midtown all the way to the intensity of downtown. So policies guide our recommendations on zone change request. And so when someone comes in, wants to change their policy, or I'm sorry, wants to change their zoning, the first thing they'll say, hey, I've got an idea for a coffee shop on the corner. I own a home on the corner of the street, and I've got an idea for a coffee shop. The first thing our folks will do is look that up and see if the existing zoning allows for that. If it does, then they go and work with the codes department. If the existing zoning doesn't allow for it, the next things our planners will do is look at what the land use policy is. They'll look at the community plan and say, well, the land use policy calls for it. So if the land use policy then is okay, say it's neighborhood center, calls for a coffee shop, then someone can apply for a rezoning. It's not guaranteed that it'll happen, but they could apply because the land use policy might support that use. The third answer to that question is no, the policy doesn't support it, and no, your existing zoning doesn't support it. So you have to then apply for a land use policy change along with the rezoning. So what's the difference? I briefly mentioned it. Land use policy is guidance. It's the vision for an area. And a policy change by itself does not change current zoning. So in this case, the applicant is asked to change from suburban neighborhood evolving to suburban mixed use corridor. They've also asked to change the zoning from a residential to an office and residential. And zoning is a law. It controls the physical development of land, and that includes things you see here: use, density, height, setbacks, parking, access, landscaping, and signage. So I mentioned existing policy, suburban neighborhood evolving. It's mainly to create residential neighborhoods with housing choices and improve the connectivity, moderate density. And that's what you see in the brown color here, this kind of taupe color. And then the requested policy is suburban mixed use corridor. And that's what you see in the hatch pattern up along Charlotte Pike. And it is basically just what it says. It's creating and enhancing a suburban mixed use corridor that has a variety of uses, usually services, housing choices, and transportation options. So as you can see here, since this property is surrounded on three sides by the suburban mixed use corridor, that made sense as the policy to ask for. And so now I'll briefly turn it over to, do we have John or the property owner that would like to say a few words about what they're trying to do?
Sure. Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Corey. My name is John Gore. I'm with Barge Cawthon Civil Engineers, and we're working with Zander Insurance on this project. As a lot of you probably know, Zander has an office building on the 1.6 acre parcel that fronts Charlotte Pike, but it also has frontage back to the streets in the rear. And they operate their office building. They have a two-story office building with some surface parking, but they're very tight on parking and have a hard time having enough parking for all their employees. So They've owned this small, it's a 0.29 acre parcel. That's kind of the subject of this rezoning, which is just to the east. And as Anita showed, the policy and the zoning kind of wrap around this parcel. Right now, it's zoned R6. And so let's say Xander would like to expand their parking on that, but to do it correctly within the zoning requirements, it needs a rezone. They don't have any intentions on building another building or building any other commercial use. So a couple of things that, from our perspective, when we were looking at the zoning, we picked OR20 because it made sense because the area to the rear was OR20, but that also gives OR20 is a zoning that allows residential or office, but does not allow a lot of the intense commercial uses that you see along Charlotte Pike. So we picked OR20 to give the neighbors assurance that there would not be commercial uses on this property. And then we also picked OR20 because it requires a C landscape buffer. In the zoning code, there's 4 different levels of landscape buffer that goes from A to D, with A being the least and D being the most intense, so that this zoning, if it goes through and Xander Insurance develops this parcel for a parking lot, would require a C landscape buffer against the residential parcel to the east. I also maybe want to address some questions about whether or not this project would tie to Cowden. There's no intention of tying the parking lot to Cowden. Cowden is actually up a bit higher than this property, and this parking lot wants to be lower down so that the employees can walk directly to the building. So there's no intention of having a driveway ramp or any other kind of vehicular connection to Cowden, which runs to the east. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. But we appreciate any questions that any neighbors have, and we'll be glad to address them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, John. We are, I just want to remind people again how 2 ways to ask questions. And then, yes, we can open it up. We can open it up because I know folks do have questions. Have we had anyone type any questions in, Corey?
Yes. From Tyler, how do I unmute and turn our camera on? Oh, she answered that.
Okay.
No, we don't have anything. It's just talking about unmuting and so Tyler says, please elaborate on the C buffer.
Sure. Let's say within the zoning code, there are 4 different landscape buffers. There are varying widths depending on the type of intensities. A C landscape buffer in this situation has probably 2 different configurations that we would consider. One configuration is a 20-foot wide landscape buffer. That's considered a C3 buffer. So that would mean that working from the property line, they would have to come into the site 20 feet before the parking could begin. And there's a certain amount of trees and shrubs that have to be planted. There's a second option that allows for less width of buffer, a 10-foot wide buffer with a 6-foot masonry wall. So the project has not gotten into detailed design of the parking lot, but that this C buffer would either be 10-foot wide landscape strip with a wall or a 20-foot wide landscape strip. And that would run along the entire eastern property line between this future parking lot and the residential development to the east.
Sade, can we unmute Tyler in case they have more questions?
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for elaborating on that. So I think the biggest concern for us as a neighborhood association is the potential for it to tie into Cowden and the traffic that it would cause. So I appreciate you elaborating on that buffer on the east side. I think something that we would be interested in doing if this is to get rezoned is to talk about going in and in the deed elaborating that there would be no access to Cowden and have that listed as part of the deed conversion.
Okay.
That would give us, you know, it's great that there's going to be a buffer and potential retaining wall, but to, as a neighborhood, to preserve the integrity of our neighborhood and the traffic, we would want something in the deed written up that no access to Cowden would be granted.
Okay.
That, honestly, that's the biggest concern that we have with this rezone, because we already have issues on Marcia with traffic. I don't know, I mentioned and met the neighbor who just purchased the house on the east side, the new development, the white house that was built. And I think they're on this call, or they were going to try to attend, but I can't see the attendees listed on the WebEx. But if they're on, I know that they had issues with having a parking lot built next door. So I think to help ease the concerns for all of the people on the call and in the neighborhood association is to have more details on the plan, the specific plan itself. Because in theory, it sounds good, but until we see something, it's all theoretical at this point.
Okay. Well, just to speak to a couple of those things, and Anita, I appreciate your input on, we're fine with the condition to make sure that there's no vehicular access ever to the Cowden. I'm thinking through a couple of ways that could maybe happen. One might be that the council member can add a condition to the council bill that prohibits it. And then the second thing is, I don't know if Metro Public Works in their staff report on the rezoning clarifies that it's prohibited, then hopefully what should happen is when the project comes through for building permits, that if some other way it slipped through, that they would catch it when building permits were applied for. But we'll be glad to elaborate on the parking lot. I should say that in addition to the buffer on the eastern side, that a new parking lot has to meet plenty of other requirements. So there would be additional landscaping in tree islands in the parking lot that are required. And Metro also has a new dark sky site lighting ordinance, which controls site lighting and making sure that there's not excess spill over the property line. So there, again, in addition to the buffer, there's some other controls there, but we can follow up with Xander Insurance, but I don't think it's any problem to share layout of the parking lot. It's pretty simple. It's essentially just an expansion of the parking that's already there. But I think we could follow back up, and it'd be something that Xander would be open to sharing with the neighborhood so they could just see kind of what that looks like.
Okay, and did you say that there was a potential, did you say there were two options potentially, where a concrete masonry wall, so like a retaining wall on that east side? Is that also an option?
Correct. The zoning ordinance, when you first, the different zonings on either side of the property line establish whether the buffer should be an A, B, C, or D. And then within those buffers in the zoning ordinance, and I'll give you the section, I don't know if you're familiar with the zoning ordinance, or if you'd like to look it up, but it's chapter 17.24.230 of the Metro zoning ordinance, and you can see these diagrams in there of the different landscape buffers. But they essentially get they have different widths, but as they get wider and wider, they require less trees. But the two options that we would probably be looking at is either the 20-foot wide landscape option with no wall, or the 10-foot wide option with a wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And like when you're looking at the land, like you said, it's lower than the Cowden Avenue access, but then also Xander Insurance, the building currently is lower than that lot. So, and you said you wanted people to be able to walk straight into the building. So how are you going to change that elevation or transition the elevation?
We are probably, they have another parking lot. I don't know if you can picture it, or we can pull back up on the screen, that is just south of this parking lot. And it's about 4 feet taller. Anita, am I allowed to share screen, or is that technically not work? If you feel like it would help, I'd be glad to kind of show the condition back there. I'm just going to show like
there you go, John.
Google Street View.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll have an easier time than I did.
Okay. Is anybody seeing this?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what you're seeing on the left is the Xander office building, and then what you're seeing on the right, up about 5 feet, is the parking lot, the existing parking lot that's to the south of the parking lot we're talking about. This lot that's kind of grown up with the ivy is the lot we're talking about. And so what we think would happen is that the parking lot would have, part of it would be graded down to have a vehicular connection to drive up there, but that these stairs would still remain So we're trying to get that parking lot down low enough that people can still walk down these steps to get to the office building. But it would not be all the way down as low as the adjacent parking lot.
Okay.
If that
Yeah, and
answers.
it does. So, when you're looking at it today and from this view, it was great because there's no access currently to Xander's current parking lot, and the only access is through Cowden because it's residentially zoned. So when we look at it, it's concerning because we want to make sure that it's more, we don't want there to be the access from Cowden. So, does it make sense to lower that lot even further down to where it's closer to level with the current parking lot? And then that way it would give you a natural buffer that you could put your retaining wall or something like that there so that the elevation difference is even greater, which would prevent anyone from being able to access that alleyway.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try to get it as it's kind of a balance between the cost of excavation and, obviously the nicest version is it's all dead flat with the office building and it's easy just to walk back without any steps. It's kind of a trade-off in the cost of excavation and earthwork and things like that. So I think what we're trying to do is get it as low as possible, so there's still an easy pedestrian connection between the two, but without, adding huge premium on the earthwork. But I think just to make sure we're clear on your other question, the way the parking lot, you couldn't connect from this lot to the building because of the wall you saw, but it does connect flush with the existing lot that's to the south. So that's the way that people could drive into the existing parking lot and drive into this parking lot without accessing Cowden or really any of the other residential streets.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I know there's a meeting, is it next week with Metro Council? Is it in regards to this policy change? I saw the 2 notifications. I want to make sure that we have time to see the plans before a vote or a conversation with Metro Council is established.
Sure. So there's 2 kind of real milestones in this process. The first milestone is the project, the rezoning and the policy amendment that goes to Metro Planning Commission. So that is the notice that you're probably seeing that's for next Thursday night. That's the Planning Commission.
September 9th. Right.
Sorry,
It's 2 weeks. Yeah.
I'm off of cycle. September 9th, that's the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission will vote on the policy amendment, but they only make a recommendation to council on the rezoning. The rezoning is not finished until the rezoning actually goes through Metro Council, and that's about another 2 months or a month and a half to 2 months after Planning Commission. So there's really 2 opportunities, for neighbors to attend and be heard during these public hearings.
There's 2 public hearings, right? And Tyler, we've got another person, Douglas Simpson, who has a question.
Good. I was trying to figure out how to talk on there. So I had a question about pervious and impervious. Right now, it's all pervious. When they pave it, how are they going to handle the water retention on that lot?
That's a good question. So there's Metro Stormwater has got some different strategies so any project like this where you build a new parking lot has to get a building permit and what we call a grading permit, where stormwater and grading plans are submitted to Metro Stormwater for review. There's really a couple options here. One is that the parking lot is built out of pervious pavers that allow the water to infiltrate through. The other is that you have small landscaped areas that are, we call them bioretention areas. They're also called rain gardens, if you've ever seen them before, that have to capture the water that leaves the impervious surfaces before it can leave the lot. So we've looked at that a little bit. I think the good news from the neighbor standpoint is this site is so much lower, it's kind of draining back onto the existing Xander property. So it's not going to be, draining onto any neighbor's property. But we will have to have a design and submit calculations to Metro Stormwater to make sure that no excess water leaves the site from its current state, so that it's not causing any problems downstream.
Okay. And second question, I know our biggest concern is traffic onto Cowden, so we're trying to find a way to ensure that doesn't happen, but can we also add in onto Neighborly also? Because I know there are other existing parking adjoins Neighborly Avenue.
I don't think that's a problem. I think I'll confirm with Xander Insurance, and we'll figure out a way again to either have the council member put this in the bill, but the intention is that the parking lot is accessed off of Charlotte, and then you can get to this new parking lot through the parking that they already have, but that there's not a different connection to Neighborly. But we can find a way to confirm that. And the question had come up with Cowden, so I specifically asked Xander about Cowden, but we will ask about Neighborly also.
But now, am I understanding that, do you have existing traffic that's accessing Neighborly from the parking lot now? Is that what you're saying?
No, there's
No,
not.
okay, okay.
So the only way to get there now is to come off of Charlotte and drive kind of back around the
Okay,
building to access this parking. But there's a fence and a bunch of brush and stuff between Neighborly and the parking lot.
And I know Will has some questions too, so let's hear from Will.
Hey, I'm actually the property owner directly to the east of the lot of the proposed rezone. And I mean, I'll be pretty frank. I really don't want a parking lot right next to my house. I would not have bought my house if it wasn't zoned the way it was, with a zoning and land use. And I mean, if and the whole purpose of zoning and land use is to be able to depend on that stuff, because people make decisions like purchasing a house next door. So I don't, and I guess in addition to that, with the proposal to lower the parking lot, that gives me concerns when it comes to erosion on my lot, considering it's the lot next door. So I have concerns about that. And Xander already has over 100 parking spots in that area, and especially with the development of Charlotte and how things are going. I don't really see Charlotte Avenue being a place where we just want to build a bunch of parking lots. I mean, if they need more parking, I wonder, have they explored options like parking decks? I mean, I would much rather a parking deck be there instead of a parking lot right next to me.
I don't know. I think that I don't want to speak for them, but I'd probably say that they just feel like, parking decks get pretty expensive, and for this kind of office use, it's probably hard to make that work. But I do appreciate your comments. Can you elaborate on what your concerns are with the parking lot? Is it light or noise, or is there anything that we can make sure we make an effort to address if the rezoning does go through?
I mean, part of it's property value. I mean, it's not going to help the property value at all. And part of it is Cowden kind of caps off Cowden as a cul-de-sac. And as far as Cowden turning into a more neighborhood street, that kind of ruins that. If that stays residential, then I mean, that would help the whole street out. I mean, it's not just my lot or the house behind me or the house on the other side of me. I mean, you have kind of a street that has the potential to be a great neighborhood, and when you take away what is essentially the cul-de-sac of the street, I mean, you're ruining that character that Cowden could potentially have, especially with I mean, you especially going up to Marcia and on top of the hill, where I think Tyler lives. You have a lot of great development happening, and I'm just concerned that if people see some of these residential zone lots being flipped over to non-residential or 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 mixed use or whatever, it's going to have a chilling effect on the whole neighborhood. And you really don't want to have a chilling effect on the neighborhood. And my thing is mostly is like, people like me do really rely on these zonings and these land use distinctions. I mean, how are we supposed to make decisions and buy stuff when it could just be flipped? So I mean, I would appreciate, number one, I just don't want it to happen. Number two, I mean, I'm sure Tyler is also concerned about this, is if it happens, I mean, I'm just worried about noise. I'm worried about light. I mean, long list of things I'm worried about. And I really understand how it fits into what development Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte Avenue has become such a hot commodity, especially in between the shopping center and then 51st. I just don't see how adding parking lots into that stretch is going to be a long-term solution to any of the land use. And it's not, it doesn't strike me as, governments enact zoning so properties are used to their maximum value of society, not just individuals. And I don't really see how that maximizes value to society.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree with your, comments about Charlotte. It's changing so fast. We worked on the project at 40th in Charlotte. We worked on the factory projects up the street. Our offices are actually just down past Charlotte, so I drop past this every morning coming to work. Again, my response might be that I agree with you that long term, I think a lot of this is redeveloping and this looks like a higher density, kind of more pedestrian centered street than what you have now in this, especially this kind of one sector, which is, low density with a lot of surface parking. And I would speculate that Xander knows that too, but that just in the short term, they've got a growing business and they've got employees who I think were parking maybe across the street with a agreement worked out with somebody else, but having to cross Charlotte, which is a difficult road to cross. And I think it's probably a short-term, reasonably short-term fix for them. But I don't disagree with you that this section of Charlotte will probably look a lot different in 10 years than it does now.
I mean, if it's a short-term fix, then why aren't we doing it? I mean, wouldn't they need a long-term solution like a parking deck?
Like I say, I could follow up with them on that, but that, like I say, is a pretty serious, financial issue. Most offices, this kind of office probably can't afford a parking deck, but I can get them a response to you to kind of specifically answer that question.
And I don't see how low density areas like parking decks fit into the community plan of West Nashville. I mean, with the land use designation, essentially, as I understand it, is the goal is to turn Charlotte Avenue into what's similar to 8th Avenue between Wedgwood and Thompson Road, where you have a lot of development up on the road, and it turns completely residential behind that. I mean, that's what's happening on Cowden up the hill. I just really hate to kill all that development just for a parking deck or for a parking lot that's apparently a short-term solution.
Right. I mean, we hear you on that. I mean, parking in general is something we struggle with as planners because, in the ideal world, if we're designing a city, we probably would do our best to hide surface parking. And that's why you see, in the zoning code, things like increasing landscape buffers and having plantings, among the spaces. So it's not just a sea of asphalt. I think the reality is, though, that Nashville is still very much, people do rely on their vehicles. And so until we, their personal vehicles, so until we get that balance of transit and other modes of travel, walking, biking, and get a true balance, I think, the reality is we do have needs for surface parking. And, I'm not defending the project by saying that. I'm just saying the reality that we work with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we hear you absolutely. And with the struggles of that. And I think, John's observation is right on too, that, you've got this long-term vision as things happen with increased density, and property values go up. And then you get somebody looking at several stories of office building where structured parking may be financially feasible then when they get to that level. But then you've got the interim period where small business owners are trying to make numbers work and everything too. And so you do have, steps. It's always incremental to get to your vision.
I don't know if I call
Absolutely.
Xander a small business owner when they need over 100 parking spots.
I'm sorry,
I don't know if I would call Xander a small business owner when they need over 100 parking spots.
Well, it's all relative. I understand. We call them a medium business owner. Like I say, they're a local business, and like I say, I understand growing and just trying to make sure they've got a place for their employees to safely park and get to work.
Of course, we're taking notes on all these, and I'm trying to give everybody the opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll come back for another round. So those of you that have already asked some questions, hopefully we'll get back to you. I think, is it Amy who's next?
Bernard Pickney.
Okay, Bernard. Okay. Hi, Bernard.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't understand. I don't know how many people were notified about this meeting, but the community plan was put together by a whole lot of folks in the community, and change the community plan, how many people have been notified? How many notices went out about this meeting?
Don, do you remember how many notices were mailed?
I'm pulling that up right now. I can tell you in just a second.
Bernard's been involved in community planning for a lot of years now.
Okay.
So,
It appears to be about a still scrolling down.
that's okay. I know it was
326.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and main reason I'm concerned, along Neighborly Avenue, across from Sanders parking lot, I own 5 pieces of property there. And, I, I don't want to have more commercial, non-residential intrusion into the neighborhood. This is just one more example of where, a business that didn't plan on what their future was, wants to come in and punish the neighborhood so they can get what they want. And, they don't really care about the neighborhood. They want to get what they want. And if they have a commercial activity next to the residential, so what? I'm just against changing the plan because, this is a plan we agreed on when we had our community meetings, and to change it just to accommodate somebody, but it didn't have the sense to plan ahead. I just think it's wrong.
Okay.
I'm just against it. And also, this property is in the urban zoning overlay, which means that if you build a business or a commercial activity, you aren't required to have the normal amount of parking. The urban zoning overlay envisions a time when people are going to walk or bike or take public transportation rather than their cars.
Right. You could get a reduction.
Right. And we're not there yet, and people hadn't quit driving yet. Until they do,
Right.
we shouldn't be going into these neighborhood, urban zoning overlay areas and making changes that make even more density and more parking. It's going to spill over into the surrounding areas. And, because the urban zoning overlay intensifies any zone change, it just makes it that much worse. You just shouldn't be able to change property that's next to residential to non-residential just because somebody wants to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Bernard. So is Amy next?
Yes, I'm here. I also wanted to support what Will had to say. I think it's a very valid point, and I think that when we as business owners want to make changes like that affect neighborhoods, we should also put ourselves in Will's shoes. What if he lived where Will did, and how would he feel about a parking lot going beside his house? So I just think that what Will said was very valid, and what Bernard said, I agree with 100%. And it's wonderful that Xander has had the success that they've had, and it's clear that they are growing and they will continue to grow. And this is just a temporary fix. It's not going to be a final thing for them. So why change the zoning and make this affect our neighborhood permanently when they'll probably have to end up doing something in 10 years to move or expand somewhere else, and then we're stuck with the zoning. And then also, does this invite other people to want to do the same thing when their businesses need to grow? We have other businesses that are affecting our traffic and that aren't very attractive with the traffic and parking on Marcia. And I just think that, like Bernard said, it's poor planning, and I disagree with it. I don't think we should allow it.
Okay. Okay, who's next? Who wants to ask a question? Does anyone have? Okay, Tyler, do you have another one?
Yeah, I was just curious, do we have someone from Xander on the call, or do we have Mary Carolyn Roberts? Anybody in attendance to hear these comments?
Yes, we have someone. We have one of the property owners, right, John? Or someone from
Yes.
Xander. I don't believe the council member is on the call, though.
No Mary Carolyn Roberts, no Jim Schulman. I'm the co-chairman of the neighborhood association, and I've reached out to both of them, left voicemails, sent emails, had no response. So I appreciate Corey coming out to meet with us and talk about it and look over the proposed plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it does frustrate me that neither one of them joined. She's supposed to represent the neighborhood, so she should attend meetings like this. She was the reason why. She said that we should form a neighborhood association to prevent spot zoning. That's exactly what this is. So I'd appreciate if she would attend or chime in or return emails or phone calls.
Okay.
And then I guess my other comment would be, if this gets rezoned and a parking lot gets put in there, what happens when they outgrow those spaces?
That's a good question. I think long-term, any business would have to kept growing, would have to look at, do they have to relocate somewhere, or like some people mentioned, do they end up redeveloping their whole property with a taller building, with a parking deck, kind of like the new office building that's behind 5 Points Pizza, a little bit east. Is it Nova something? There's kind of a printing company, I think, that's got a new maybe 4 or 5 story office building at 40th and Charlotte. So again, I can't speak for Xander, but I would think if they kept growing, they're kind of hemmed in on all sides, and they would have to look at some sort of other, bigger redevelopment plan.
Yeah, it kind of seems like we're at that point already. Kind of seems like they're already outgrowing their space, so maybe it's time for them to move.
Well, understand.
Hey guys, this is Josh from Xander.
Hi,
Hello,
Josh.
Josh.
Hey, I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm one of the executive vice presidents here at the agency, and wanted to be on this call just to kind of hear everyone's concerns and kind of hear how all of this is starting to shake out. I think as it relates to just a few things I wanted to say real quick. As it relates to Neighborly, we currently have no access to Neighborly. Our fence is blocked off there. If I recall correctly, when we acquired the property a few years back, I want to say there was an issue with placing a culvert there from the street to the parking lot, and how I don't know that it was smiled upon, I guess. So we had considered a gated entry at that point, and we decided against it shortly upon moving on, just because there was so much access on Charlotte. And to be honest, most of the traffic that we would need to come in and out of the parking lot wouldn't be any better served by running out onto Neighborly and causing another 3-4 minute drive just to get out into the main road. So that didn't appear to be very effective. The second thing I would say is we have explored a parking deck. I'll tell you that getting a bid from a couple engineering firms, I don't think we were even a third of the way into the project design before we were at $250,000. There were a lot of suggestions as to where we would place it, whether that be in the existing lot that we've already got that backs up to this property that we're talking about now, or somewhere else. It was nowhere near cost effective, and I think we were only talking about a couple dozen spots, something like that. So that was kind of out of the question to begin with. Then the next thing I would say is another reason we acquired this property. Number one, we didn't even know it would even be available when we did buy the property. So bought this existing building. So from a planning perspective, this was something that was very, very unforeseen. And the fact that it was surrounded by 3 sides commercial already made it what we consider to be a decent investment. So last, what I would say is we had an employee that was struck out on Charlotte with a driver who was texting and driving. it was oddly enough, I believe it was her first day or first week out on the job. And that became a very, very, very scary situation. Not something that I care to go through again, nor does our president or everyone involved. So when this opportunity came about, and we did do planning and investigation with several different folks as to how many spaces we could get, whether it be cost effective, would it be safe, how much disruption to the neighborhood it would actually cause. We considered a lot of what you guys are talking about, and again, I appreciate the feedback, and I'm looking forward to talking to John more about it. So just wanted to pipe in and let you guys know I care what you're saying, and I hear you.
Thank you, Josh. We have Will has another question, I believe. Will?
Hey, and I know, like, I'm sorry that happened to your employee, and I that's scary. I wish maybe there was a sidewalk design or something that could alleviate that, or maybe a light that could be put in or something that might be more neighborhood friendly. But my second concern is if Xander gets too big too fast. I mean, I don't really see that law adding that many more spots. I mean, do we have a confirmation of how many spots it would add for you guys?
John, you going to take that, or do you want to take that?
I think it's probably between 10 and 20. I mean, we looked at some different scenarios, but you know.
So how many people park across the street right now?
Let's see, I think there might be. Well, I mean, to answer your question, nobody right now. I mean, we're implementing a remote workforce, just given the situation with COVID, so on and so forth. There are, I believe, I want to say there's like 65 spots available or something like that, but we also don't own that lot.
So you're still going to have people park across the street even if you rezone this.
That's not what I said. We're implementing a remote workforce as well, and yeah, I mean, we are growing. I wouldn't say we're like getting to 1,000 people or anything like that. But
hey, maybe.
Go ahead.
I said maybe one day.
Not in this building. This building.
Yeah, Josh, I think you're saying that the parking lot is not owned by you and it allows others to park there too. That's what you're saying, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
I just
this building will not hold 1,000 people. I promise you that.
Would you still have to have employees park across the street if you rezone this?
So if it's a remote working environment, and again, I think the pandemic has done a lot to change our mind as it relates to who we need on site, who we don't need on site. So I wouldn't say that we would necessarily need anybody to park across the street, but I would want to leave that up to Mr. Xander and executive management.
So I mean, that just adds to my concern of why would you destroy, like, if you create a parking lot here, they're never having a house built on that because the cost to tear up a parking lot and make it residential again. I mean, if you're going to change the zoning and it's not even going to solve your problem, I mean, because I mean, that's what I'm hearing is that's what I'm hearing from you is that you're kind of dancing around the question because you're still going to have people park across the street. So we're going to rip up this lot and pave it, and then you guys are going to have to move in 5 years. I mean, and y'all will move on, but the neighborhood will never get that lot back. I mean, that's my problem. And it's not just me; it's everyone in Cowden, it's people in Marcia, and it's the whole neighborhood. I mean, if this doesn't even solve your problem, and if you're, implementing remote work, I mean, it sounds like you might not even need it. Either you're remote and you don't need it, or you're just going to overflow again. And I mean, are you going to? Then I'm concerned. Are you going to try to buy the lot across the street from me too? I mean,
I understand the concern. It sounds like you might be confusing two different things, but if at one point you said if we're doing remote working, then it does solve our problem. But then you're saying if we turn this into a parking lot, it doesn't solve our problem. In the end, it's something that does help our situation. By the way, we're only open until 5 o'clock on Monday through Friday. So from a noise perspective, I don't suspect this is going to be something that has, you know, midnight parties late into the night as the previous house did. So I think adding the space, whatever spaces we're able to get, with limited access to neighborly, or no access, sorry, to neighborly, and of course considering that we're not accessing Cowden also, and the fact that it's surrounded by 3 sides commercial anyway, and it backs up to a used car lot and an insurance agency. You know, it seems like a good expansion effort for us. But I understand your concern, and I get that. I understand that.
I mean, I just don't understand why we would change zoning if it's not going to fix anything. It's just going to harm people in the end.
Right. Corey and I are writing all these concerns and questions down so that we can talk about it and discuss more. Absolutely. I appreciate everyone joining us and being and expressing your thoughts and concerns. Definitely. Right. I think this is a unique situation, and oftentimes this would never get to the stage it has with the community meeting, because the answer would be no, you know, not expand into the neighborhood. But as we mentioned, this is just such a different location than you normally see, where you are surrounded on 3 sides. And so we did want to talk to the community and see what concerns were there. So I really appreciate everyone coming out and spending time with us this evening. I think we've answered the questions and let folks speak, correct? Have we got any more questions, Corey?
Hey, Josh, this is Tyler real quick. I appreciate you being on. I appreciate all the insight that you're giving here. So how many employees does Xander employ today?
The last I checked, we were around that 180 mark.
Okay, and your current parking, not including across the street, but your current parking on site allows for how many spots?
I believe it's 119 with handicap access and visitor parking.
Okay, and this new proposal that John presented to us would add how many more parking spots?
John and I need to confirm it, but we suspect it's somewhere around 20.
We've got one more question, so let's hear from is it Caitlin?
It's Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin.
I want to reemphasize what Amy was saying. As Xander continues to grow, which is really great for them, they leave this parking lot behind that is still next door to our house. Will and I purchased this house less than 2 weeks ago, and would never have bought a house next door to a parking lot. We looked at many houses that were next door to parking lots and didn't purchase them for that very reason. It hurts our property value, and honestly, it's just not attractive. I guess the safety isn't a real concern with the barrier, but like, I just don't like that, to be honest. I also think it just creates a gateway where this could happen elsewhere. Like, there are neighbors near us across the street, like their house will probably be one that when they sell will be bought and torn down and either will be turned into a parking lot too, or if it stays residential, it will be built into another house in a new development. And so I think if you allow this to be rezoned, it just creates a floodgate where every other house that gets torn down and leveled can be turned into a parking lot too. And that's not the neighborhood that we thought we were moving into.
Right.
Also, I know you're saying that no one anticipated Xander growing this much, but like, I just wonder when did you purchase the lot that's next to ours and like tear down the house? And like, if it wasn't with the intention of growing into a parking lot, like what was it for?
Let's so quickly. I think I want to say it was September of 19. Last year was just a blur for me. September of 19. It has always been the intent for us to have a parking lot there, not a convenience store, not a gas station. not, anything like that. So that's always been the intent.
And I know that we're saying this, I feel like there's been some disagreements, but I just want to say that I agree with everyone who said, like, if you're remote, then like you don't really need the extra parking. But if you're not remote, then people still have to park across the street. So it again feels like it's not even really a temporary solution for the insurance company. Like, I mean, it's barely a band-aid over a bullet hole at that point, and just leaves us living next door to a parking lot forever.
So just to clarify, remote working is where employees work from their house, right? So they wouldn't necessarily be parking in across the street or anything like that.
Right. I understand what remote working is,
right.
but if they're remote working, you don't need an extra overflow parking lot because people aren't driving to your office. They're staying at their house.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood you right there.
Yeah.
I know some of you have reached out to Corey. I've seen some emails, Tyler, and you've got Corey's email address. But as you think of more, because you may have some more thoughts, because we're getting close to time for this meeting, and I think we've gotten through questions. I think we've heard concerns and questions. So reach out. My email address, Anita, ANITA .McCaig, MCCAIG @nashville.gov. And Corey is CORY.Clark, CLARK @nashville.gov. Reach out to us with more questions and concerns. And stay tuned for next steps as we think through what needs to happen next and work with the applicants. Sound good for everyone?
Thanks, Anita.
Yeah, you bet. And we can get you in touch if you've got more questions for John and Josh. We can get you in touch with them, and if you don't already have their contact information. But yes, thank you once again. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And if you think of more thoughts and concerns, we took really good notes. If you think of more thoughts and concerns, let us know. Have a good one, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Anita.